talk to Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi. Good to see you, as always. Look, can we start with what we heard from the Prime Minister last night? I mean, obviously, there's very positive news that he confirmed around easing of restrictions next week, but I mean, he was a bit slim on the detail of how we move forward. I mean, in particular, things like the vaccine passports, the certification. We don't actually know how that's going to be rolled out, do we?
Good morning, Stephen. I think it's important to just remember what the Prime Minister said yesterday, that next Monday you can go to a beer garden and have your beer. There is no requirements for vaccine certification or passports that are being referred to. In May, you'll be able to go inside the pub and enjoy your drink, and there is no question of a vaccine certification being asked for. So I just want to sort of allay some of those fears. Now, we need to unpack this a little bit for your viewers. International travel, a number of countries have already indicated that they're going to require some form of certification, as they do now, as we require a pre-departure test certificate. So it's important that we make sure that operationally, that the protocols are designed and work in a way that's really advantageous to our citizens, which is why the task force looking at this is working through those protocols at the same time as the NHS is operationally making it viable. So if people do need their certificate, if and when it is appropriate for them to travel, then they'll be able to have that certification available to them. That's only right. Now, use of certification domestically does throw up a number of difficult ethical questions, which is why Michael Gove has been consulting with businesses, with stakeholders, with colleagues in Parliament, so that we listen to all sorts of views. Now, it would be completely remiss and irresponsible of government. I'd be coming on your program and you'd be saying to me, we've seen this work in Europe, we've seen it work in Israel. Why haven't we thought about this? Why are we behind other countries? So it's only appropriate and right that we make sure that the technology, the operations are available and ready to go for international travel as and when that is.
Yeah, OK. Forgive me for jumping in. Forgive me for jumping in. The international travel, and we will talk about travel a bit more in a moment, but I think a lot of people would understand that. The domestic issue does cause some concern. The Prime Minister didn't rule out passports for pubs last night. You seem to be saying this morning that that is not going to be the case. But if you can say that categorically about going inside to the pub from May onwards, then why can't you say what's going to be happening with things like restaurants, with things like cinemas and concert venues?
So he said that yesterday about next Monday in a pub garden, in May inside a pub. He's made that very clear. But we're also piloting large-scale, public, whether it be sports events like the FA Cup final, semi-final, or other events, to look at how, whether it's testing or vaccination or immunity to the virus, can help us open up more of our economy. It's only responsible that we look at all the available data and, of course, all the available routes for us to get our lives back as quickly as possible. That is only what you'd expect from us, because if we're not doing this and we see it working in other countries, the first thing you'd be doing is saying, why haven't you thought of this? Why didn't you look at that? And that's only the right thing to do and the responsible thing to do as a government.
Is it going to be so? But are you going down the path of saying, if it is going to be required, it's going to be an enforceable requirement, or are you going along the lines of it's going to be up to some venues to decide what they want to do?
Well, I think, as the Prime Minister said, I'm going to sort of plagiarise here. You're jumping too many fences at the same time. What we're saying is that for international travel, if our citizens need to travel at the right time, when obviously international travel returns, we will make sure that they're able to demonstrate their certification, whether it be a pre-departure test certificate or a vaccination test certificate. Domestically, the step 2, which we're coming up to step 3, there will be absolutely no issue around pubs or restaurants requiring any form of certification, but it's only responsible as we see how this virus behaves, as we see how other countries are utilizing technologies to make sure that they keep the virus under control, then we should look at the same thing. It's only the right thing to do. We're all working towards the same outcome, which is to get our lives back, get our economy running, whilst at the same time.
This is all about clarity, not only for these businesses, but for the consumers who use them. And we're getting it, to be fair, we're getting information from you, some clarity that we didn't get from the PM last night. So you're saying when things reopen, like going inside to a pub, going inside to a restaurant, going inside to a cinema, or, for example, because obviously cinemas are looking to reopen in May, you are saying, are you, that at this point in time, there is absolutely no requirement that you're expecting for a passport to be required, a COVID passport to be required?
To be fair, that's exactly what the PM clarified last night. He said that when you go to the pub garden on Monday, you'll be able to sip your pint without requiring any form of certification. When you go inside the pub on May the 17th, if we continue to obviously make sure we look at the data, there's 4 weeks plus one. Remember that we are going to make sure to keep on top of this virus by making sure we keep looking at the data. You won't be needing that COVID vaccine certification, but we are looking at piloting large-scale events like the FA Cup final, initially looking at testing, using testing as the technology, but also looking at other ways, including immunity and, of course, vaccines, as a way of making sure we take as much of our lives back as quickly as possible. If you continue to have your target as being working together to get our lives back, to get the economy up and running, then you won't get this wrong.
Okay. What is very important, and it falls within your remit that I really need to ask about, is the regulatory authority raising some concerns about AstraZeneca, the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, being given to the under-30s. Now, we know some research has shown perhaps an elevated risk of a blood clot in younger people. Is it your understanding that this is now being looked at?
So the MHRA, led by June Rain, have been looking at this all the time. They have always made sure that they look at all incidents with all the vaccines that will be deployed. We're currently deploying at scale Pfizer and, of course, the Oxford AstraZeneca. And they've been very clear that the benefits of the vaccine far outweigh any of these rare incidents of risk. And if you get the call to take your vaccine, but of course, we will be guided by the MHRA, by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization, as they continue to look at these very rare incidents. And I think that's only right. And of course, just as a sort of reminder to your viewers, the MHRA is independent of government, and they publish through the yellow card system all incidents, as they did last week, as they're going to do again. So that's important. We've led the largest and probably one of the most successful vaccination programs in the world. The confidence in that vaccination program is because we have such a robust regulatory framework in the United Kingdom. I think that's important to remember as well. And June Rain last night made it very clear that if you get your invitation, please come forward. Between December, Stephen, and the end of February, the vaccination program has saved 6,300 people over 70 from dying. So that puts it in perspective.
Absolutely it does. But we're not talking about, unless it's under very specific health reasons, we're not talking about calling the under-30s up to get their vaccine just yet. And we know that different vaccines have different strengths and weaknesses within different age groups. I mean, that is scientifically understood. So is it prudent at this point to be looking in detail now at whether under-30s, when it comes to be their turn, need to be given a different vaccine?
Well, as I said, the regulator continues, as does the European regulator and the WHO, to recommend that the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine be given to all ages over 18. They continue to obviously monitor and look very carefully at these very rare cases of blood clotting. Again, another perspective on this, we've done almost 20 million vaccinations using the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. And they make sure that they look at each and every adverse incident that occurs At the moment, they're being very clear to say, look, if you get your invite, please come forward and take the vaccine because it protects you, protects your family, protects your community. We saw some data from Chris Whitty yesterday demonstrating the efficacy of these vaccines. But we will be led, my deployment team will be led by what the regulator, what the scientists tell us is the right thing to do. We've got other vaccines coming along, including the Moderna vaccine very shortly, and then of course the Janssen J&J vaccine, and more Pfizer and more AstraZeneca. So we are in a good place because of what decision that Matt Hancock and Boris Johnson took very early on last year to make sure that we have the vaccines available to us to be able to protect the whole nation. And I'm confident we'll do that by the end of July.
Look, just to change track, just to finish with, over this whole David Cameron Greensill issue, which is causing concern about the transparency of lobbying and what is what happens within the corridors of power. You were in the policy unit when Lex Greensill seemed to have this rather strange, rather unique access to number 10 with his own business card and government email address and everything else. I mean, did you think that was normal at the time? Did it raise any concerns with you?
Well, I'd never met Lex Greensill during my work in the policy or since then. The job he was doing, unpaid, was to look at supply chains for the then Prime Minister David Cameron. All the usual approvals would have been gone through to be able to appoint him as that supply chain advisor to the Prime Minister. And I think that's important. We have got the checks and balances in place that take place in terms of any approvals of any advisor to any Prime Minister. And I think that's important to remind your viewers of that.